What is your biggest irrational fear?
My biggest irrational fear?
That everything that I'm working towards is going to come crashing down at any moment. I don't know why. It's, yeah, I'm not sure why. Just, it might be to do with the fact that I understand that everything's temporary and nothing lasts forever. But for some reason, when I'm working towards something that I really care about, that is, I have an irrational fear that at any moment it's just going to come crashing down and I'm going to lose everything.
Right. Okay, yes.
Bit of a deep one to start with, huh? Do you believe in fate?
In fate?
Yeah.
So you believe you're destined for something. You don't know what, but
Yeah, I believe everything. Yeah, I believe everything's already written. Yeah.
okay. Has that provided you any comfort in any way?
100%, man.
I think what way, as it comes to kind of fate and everything kind of being free written already, that comes down to my faith, I think, and from the fact that in my belief, God has a plan for everyone, whether you know it now or whether you find about it later. Even if you want something, God's got a plan, whether it's to give it you now, whether it's to give it you later, or to give you something better than it. And so that's one of the biggest compass, basically, is that regardless of anything, whether it's going good, whether it's going bad, I know that there's a plan. God's got a plan for me, and I just let him execute on his plan, basically. And the kind of mindset that I go about my life is that God steers the direction of the boat, but I need to row, type of thing. Okay, so I just need to put in the work. Obviously, I need to figure out what direction am I going with my life and still be directional with it. But the actual direction it tangibly ends up going is up to him rather than up to me.
How does that affect free will? Just linear question.
That's a very interesting one. And it's one that I've thought about quite a lot. I don't really have a final answer with it. I still do believe we have free will, but in the sense that, you know how I say everything's already pre-written, right?
Yeah.
I believe we've all got a book. Everything's written in that book already. In that book might be written as you please in certain times, you know? So even if it's already pre-written, your destiny is already written for you. Part of that might be that for certain situations, it's as you please. Whatever it is that you pray to God for, whatever it is that you manifest in whatever situation, that's what you'll end up getting in certain situations. So even though you're not always going to get everything you want, and it's not, I don't believe we're fully in control of everything in our life. I do believe that in certain instances, there are times where it's not that everything's pre-written for you in a single dimensional way, but in a very multi-dimensional way, right? Do you know about the butterfly effect?
Yes.
So I really believe in that, where one small thing that you might do in your life can change things a year, 5, 10, 15 years from now, so that your life looks completely different. And I believe that with fate as well, where during certain points in your life, there are going to be almost like splitting points where it's going to be written as you please, and you kind of are the master of what ends up happening at that moment, which means that out of the infinite realities that could have occurred from that very point, you're the one who's choosing what direction it then goes in. Is that kind of
Right. Okay, I understand. Yeah, makes sense. That on the point of the butterfly effect, I went to see Jordan Peterson live, maybe a year or two ago, in the O2, and he said something a quote from Dostoevsky. He said, "Every man is responsible not only for everything that happens to him and that he does, but for everything that happens to everyone and everything that everyone does."
Okay.
Does that kind of relate to what you're saying, or what does that mean to you?
So I'm unsure on the second half of that part, but I strongly believe in that first part. I think that everything in your life is very much your responsibility. Even if certain things that happen to you aren't your fault, they don't happen to you, because when they happen to you, you're in the passenger seat of the car. You're not in control. And you can very easily get into a victim mentality, which therefore spirals it even further. So I think taking what I like to call radical responsibility for your life, of regardless of how dire a situation might be, you could be walking down the pavement and you get hit by a car, right? Not your fault, right? You were doing what you should have been. You're walking on the pavement. You're not on the street. You're not being an idiot. But if you're getting hit by the car, it's still your responsibility to do something about it. And it doesn't really, it sounds pretty like extreme in a way. It's like, what are you talking about, bro? Like,
chill out. Sometimes like things happen to you, like it's okay. And I completely agree with that, which is why I like to differentiate between fault and responsibility. Fault is one thing, but and even with fault, to be honest, I believe that in the grand scheme of things, everything's very balanced. In that, you know, what goes around comes around. Do unto others what you want done unto you. But if, regardless of any situation that ever happens, even if it's not something that you are at fault for, the moment you take responsibility, and the reason I say it to this extreme is because it puts the power back in your hands. And it puts you back in the driver's seat. So something that actually gives you power again. And to use the car example again, no, it's a bit of an extreme one, but let's say you're walking down the street and you get hit by a car, right? You're gonna feel pretty bad about it, right? You might be thinking, oh no, like my leg's injured, how am I gonna crane? Or, I'm not gonna be able to do my, if you work a job that's kind of got labor involved in it, oh no, maybe I won't be able to do that, how am I gonna provide for my family? You have all of these things that all of a sudden you might not be able to do. And the moment you allow that to let you fall into that victim mentality, like you're done for, it's like, oh no, I got hit by a car, I'm done, like khalas, like I can't train, I can't do this, I can't do that, I'm injured, this guy did it to me. Whereas if you say, okay, like, honestly, I didn't want to get hit by a car, it's not my fault, I'm upset at the situation, what can I do about it? Because it's still my responsibility to do something about it, right? So, okay, cool, if I can't train because my leg's injured, I can still train my upper body, right? Maybe there are certain ways that I can actually move my leg that will be productive to my training in the long term, where I can't do any heavy squats, but maybe I can go in, I can do some really, really light leg extensions that allow me to just move my leg slowly through a positive range of motion, right? And while doing that, still keeping that training mentality of I'm still gonna show up every single day. Even if I can't do a leg workout, that's fine. But I can still train my upper body, I can still train my arms, I can still train my back. There's a lot that you still can do. And it's more than about your perspective of what you can do and what you will do. And again, it puts the power back in your hands. And in the long run, I've always found with these situations that it sets you on the right path. Even when things are just not your fault and you are absolutely in your right to cry about it and then do something about it. Because like, what else are you gonna do?
Okay. There's a lot of tangents I can go on this. This topic is like, at least it's something that I've delved into a lot, for just taking responsibility and giving power back to yourself. Because, you know, a lot of people go around blaming other people for things that happen to them. And what, again, as you said, it takes the power of your hands. Like, you can continue to blame your bad upbringing for the reason you're in the place you are, or the fact that, you know, you didn't go pro in the sport because you broke a leg. You can continue to blame those things, but you ultimately put power back into those people or those events that happen instead of putting power into the situation where you are now. Yeah. So I completely agree with your point. There's, on the point about giving power back to things, Alex Moses talks about this, about the reason we think God's omnipotent, like all-powerful, is because the distance between thoughts and reality is a snap. They'll think something and it'll happen. So they're named as all-powerful. So how can we be more godlike and give ourselves more power in our lives? The way that we can do that is when we think something, the quicker we act on something that we think, the more powerful we become in our own lives.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a little extra to add on the point. What do you think of that? The fact that if we close the gap between thought and reality, we can essentially gain more control over our own lives.
How do you mean?
So say I were to think, like, I probably need to make this video. I probably need to make this video. The closer I make the gap, close the gap between I need to make this video and actually making the video, the more control I have over the things I do and the progress I make in my own life. Versus if I extended the gap and I was like, oh, I should probably make the video, and I spent 2 months thinking about should I make the video or not, I have less power over the way things go about.
Oh, like taking control of your reality, right? Now, 100%, man, I agree. That I'm very much a doer, and even in my business, like I'm more of the doer than the thinker. And I actually needed to learn the other things. I'm quite extreme on the doing, such that sometimes I actually don't think about what I'm doing. But I completely agree. Like, the best way to manifest something positive and to work towards your goals is to work towards your goals, right? Like, if there's something that you want, instead of just thinking about how great of an idea it is, and kind of dwelling on the thought, just, okay, I want to do this thing, I want this to happen, let me try it, right? And there's this concept that I think Hormozy talks about as well of fail fast. So if you have an idea or like a business idea, to start it, learn, do it, even if you're not prepared for it. That way you fail fast and you learn and you then iterate and improve, rather than trying to flesh out the perfect idea straight away. Because I see it as the equivalent, since we're in the gyms, to use a gym example, but when you first start going to the gym, what's important is that you have a habit, right? Is that you are going in, you are regularly moving your body, you're trying really hard. And from there, over time, you begin learning about different muscle groups, how to engage different muscles, about strength training, hypertrophy, mobility, and then how to structure a training program and how to optimize your training. And then you can get so detailed into kind of how to write your training program. But you're never going to learn that stuff when you've never gone to the gym. I mean, sure, like you can go on YouTube, you can watch loads of videos, how to write the perfect training program, but you've not experienced it. And we're humans who learn by experience, right? Whether it's other people's experience or most importantly, our experience. Once you experience something, that's when you can actually tangibly learn how to go in the right direction, because you've done it. And you're no longer in the dark on certain topics. You can see things a lot clearer. Whereas if you've not done anything, you've never stepped foot in the gym, how are you going to know that you need to really supinate your bicep a lot to feel it in your bicep, right?
Yeah.
You don't even know what that is, right? Once you've done a few curls and you're like, I don't feel it in my biceps, and someone tells you, oh yeah, just really turn your hand in, and you begin feeling it, right? Then you understand that concept because you felt it. And like you said, there's a shorter disconnect between yourself and that reality, right? Because if you know, again, just to use a bicep as an example, if you know what it feels like to engage your bicep, for example, then when you think about, oh, I need to supinate to feel my bicep more, your thought process isn't, oh, I need to supinate to feel my bicep more because I saw in a video that biomechanically this happens at X, Y, Z, and therefore I need to do it. Instead, it's like, I supinate and I really feel it in my bicep. It's simple. It's simple. And I feel like that's the case with anything in your life, like you said, where if you do it, then you shorten that connection between your thought and the reality, because there's less steps involved, and you're able to minimize the steps involved to go from thought to reality when you do it. Because when you do it, you experience it. And when you experience it, that's based on your direct senses that you have to see and feel the world, right? So bit of a tangent there, but like, I get what you're saying.
Have you heard the concept of unteachable lessons?
Yes.
Yeah, you've heard this, haven't you? I'll go into it in a second. Let me do my stuff. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Let's deal with that concept of unteachable lessons, right? Oh yeah. So it's Chris Williamson coined the term, I'm pretty sure. So it's the 2D and 3D lessons. So 2D lessons are the kind of stuff that you can read when, you're reading books, someone gives you a piece of advice, you watch a video, someone gives you a piece of advice. It's like, you should do this or you shouldn't do this. And 3D lessons are the one that you have to experience, right? So I agree with your thing, and it goes on to that entire thing about experience is the main thing which is going to teach you the lessons that are hard to teach on just paper. So it's like, money won't buy you happiness, or going after the pretty girl who may not have that much of a personality, but hey, she's pretty and kind of like not that much available. So you want to chase off that. But now I've got a counter statement towards that. I want to hear what you think. It's someone giving you a piece of advice to tell you not to do something might actually stop you from learning something that you were meant to learn on the thing that you're doing. So since everyone's different in their own way, everyone learns lessons differently. So if someone tells you not to do this, that might stop you going down a path that would have taught you a lesson, that would have sparked something within you to do something great.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that?
It can definitely do that. And this is where the direction your life can take is I don't know how to say it, is very infinite, right? Like at any one point in time you can change your life. But like right now, I could go to South America. I could hop on a flight right after this podcast, but go to South America, never come back again. My life will look very different, right? At the same time, I could go back home, I could go back to work and continue living my life as I always live it. And I'll get to your point, but because of that, there's a lot of what ifs, basically. So if someone tells you not to do something, that's always like a what if, like, okay, that can stop you from learning something, But at the same time, them stopping you from doing something can also, on the flip side, put you on a path where you're not learning that thing, but maybe you skip learning that thing and you learn something even deeper than it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yes, yeah, and it's and this is where it can get a little bit confusing. And I've gone into these spirals of thoughts many times before of like, okay, well, how do I live the most optimal life, right? Like, I love making things optimal. I love being efficient with my time, with what I do with my life, and I've gone through these spirals of thought of like, how do I live life as optimally as possible, right? So that I can achieve the most that I can, as efficiently as possible. But that also then begins to take away from experiencing life itself, where, let me think, where in wanting to be as efficient as possible with your training and constantly thinking about that, you're never actually enjoying the training itself. With wanting to be as efficient as possible with how you run your business, maybe you won't enjoy running the business like while you have it, right? And appreciating what you have. And it can go for kind of many things, which is where I guess this goes into like a slightly different realm of thinking of kind of being present versus not being present, where there's an element of needing to be present in your life, obviously, but you don't want to always be present. But at the same time, if you're always not present, that can lead to you not actually experiencing what you actually want to experience in your life, where it's like, I'm always aiming for more, I always want to hit the next goal, which is great if you're ambitious and you'll get to those next goals. But at what point do you stop and say, oh yeah, like life's pretty cool actually, like this is quite nice what I have right now, you know?
The thing about being present, the one thing that I actually had a conversation about this with my girl, and it was, if you think so much about being present, you quite paradoxically stop being present, because you're thinking so much about being present, thinking, am I being present? And that's not being present. Yeah, so when we're growing up, so as kids, we're completely ultimately present. We're present in the situation, we're not really thinking about other things, we're in the moment. So we have unconscious competence, and then life goes by through unconscious competence to unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to unconscious competence.
Right.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I guess that's the important thing to learn about, or being more present and just putting these things into your life, that these character traits or these kind of actions that you're trying to implement into your life. The one thing that people need to understand, I guess, is that you have to get worse in order to get better. I'm going on the point of the present. I'll go into the other stuff later, but on the point of being present, if you want to become more present, you have to become less present in order to become more present in the future.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? It's with a lot of other things as well. Like, you've built a certain habit on, whether, like, say there's a sport you're playing, right?
Yeah.
Or like, I'll use the example of like solving a Rubik's Cube, right? People will start like moving it like this, like to solve it. And you might get like really good to solving like in like 2 minutes or something like that. But if you want to get any quicker than that, you have to unlearn the habit of moving it like this and start using your fingers and to start flipping things around to be even quicker at the thing. But in order to do that, your time is going to become slower because you're not going to be used to flicking it with your fingers. Your time's going to get slower in order for it to ultimately get faster in the future. Which I think is an important thing.
It temporarily gets slower in order to then raise the ceiling. And the same thing goes for like look ahead as well, right? Or look ahead with solving a Rubik's Cube. So I got very nerdy into Rubik's Cubes once upon a time. And the same way that you want to begin using your fingers, you want to almost, similar to chess, you want to look ahead in the game, right?
Yeah.
Of thinking, what am I going? When I make this move, what position is it going to put the board in or the cube in? And therefore, then what am I going to do from there? And so it teaches you actually, when you begin doing that, well, you're actually looking at the cube for like 10, 15 seconds, right? Or it's like, okay, how's the cube looking? Where are the different colors and all of this stuff? And now let me make my move. Because then you can make the move that's actually the most efficient in the long term, i.e. the solving of the cube, but initially takes up a tenth of your time. But it goes back to the saying where if I want to chop down a tree, I'll spend, if I have an hour to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 40 minutes sharpening my axe. So not exactly like that, there's something like that. And it kind of goes back to kind of how we live our life as well, where we can't just be eternally present. And that's just an unfortunate reality, right? Like, because that, in my opinion, can then lead to a mindset where you're just chasing instant gratification because you want to always be present and you don't want to look ahead and
plan ahead and do things that are hard for now in order to be better for later. But it's, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
No, it all makes a bunch of sense. Well, a question to ask you about you were talking about the need that, and you want to optimize everything. I've got a question to ask you about that, but we'll do our set first.
That's it.
I'll get it. Has it ever been a problem to you that you've tried to optimize everything? I think you kind of touched into that you know that you've struggled with doing the other side of not being so optimal.
Yeah.
What steps have you been taking to help you, relax a bit more?
That's a deep question. It goes down to the reason I wanted to be optimal with everything is that growing up, it's, my values were to work, basically. And the more I work, the better grades I get, the better a person I am, basically, which obviously is false, but that's how I felt growing up, basically. And for that reason, that led to my mindset of, well, okay, cool. For me to be the best person I can be, then I just need to work as much as possible. And for me to work as much as possible means I need to increase my productivity so I can do more per unit of time, right? So it becomes like a bit of a formula. At one point, it's not something that I do to to relax a bit more, but something that I realized more so. And this is actually when I went traveling. So I never really took a break from work. Even when I went traveling, I didn't really take a break, but I just reduced it a bit. But it kind of just opened my eyes up, just kind of going to the other side of the world by myself and just exploring and just adventuring for a little bit. And I was like, you know what, actually, like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, I'm sat here at my desk all day, right? Like, I'd wake up, work, go gym, come back, work, go sleep, and repeat. And that was my life since, like, secondary school, basically. And I remember, actually, this was while I was on top of the mountain, right? I can show you the picture later, but it was this really nice, there's a volcano. And I was looking out on the sunrise, and this was after going to that mountain in the evening, watching the sunset, stargazing, camping in the mountain, and then watching the sunrise. And I was just looking at the sunrise, like, over the clouds and everything. I was like, man, like, I wasn't living, man. Like, that's not what life is about. Like, and don't get me wrong, like, you need to work hard, 100%. And I think it's definitely taught me that. But I think in order to find a balance in your life, you need to have lived either of the two extremes. And I've lived the extreme of only working and not actually experiencing and living life. And I wouldn't say I've gone to the other extreme, but I've also then gone while I was traveling and I worked a lot less. And that's where I kind of was more in let me just live life. Let me experience life. Let me not care about money or work or anything like that. And in kind of going to either side, it's allowed me to at least, and it goes down to the experience thing, gauge what balance truly is. Because it means that if there are certain times in my life where I simply need to work hard, I will work hard. And I have no problem with that. I have no problem with being really efficient, getting down with the grind, doing a bit of a monk mode. I don't know if you've heard of that. Doing a bit of monk, but that's fine. I'm more than happy doing it, and I can do it for however long, because I've lived a very long life of doing it, not lost. I've lived up to my life doing that, right? But at the same time, in experiencing what either extreme looks like, I know when to then scale back. So there are going to be certain times in my life where I'm like, you know what? Let me chill out a little bit. Let me take everything in and let me just enjoy myself, right? Let me enjoy what life has to offer. And with that obviously comes a responsibility to make sure it doesn't affect work and to make sure that I've worked hard enough such that when I take a break, it doesn't negatively impact it, or that I have a plan. It comes with the responsibility, but ultimately then being able to take some time down, like, okay, let me chill out a little bit, basically. Let me enjoy life a little bit. And so it's more of an experience thing, basically. Going to either extreme and then understanding what balance is and where and how to fluctuate, because I've felt what both extremes are like.
It's the importance of life's contrast. You need to have left, you need to have the right. You can't only have one. It's the I've thought about this so much. Anytime I try to do something that's past the norm, so especially like this podcast, this show, it's like, I don't know whether it's going to do well. I don't know that. I can't predict that. But the fact that I don't know what's going to happen, and the fact that
there is this idea that I could succeed, and then the fact that there's this idea that I won't succeed makes the idea of success so much more. Whoa, what's the word?
So much more valuable, because you need to have the downs to be able to appreciate the ups, and it's same the other way around. It's like if you knew you were going to succeed, it wouldn't be valuable, because it's like you know what's going to happen, so that just is what it is, alright? It just is what it is. So it doesn't. In order to have value for the things that you do in your life, you need to have both sides, which I completely agree with. You see, have you heard of the concept type A, type B? Type A people, type B people, type A problems are type B problems. I've heard of it, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know what it is. I've heard people say, "Oh, I'm so type A," or like, "I'm so type B." I don't know what it is. Also, I'll kind of explain it. So, the type A person is a person that optimizes everything, constantly works hard, is grinding every single day, but they have a crippling insecurity. Like they don't think they're ever doing enough, and they don't think anytime they've worked hard, it's like, so what? It's like that's normal.
Yeah.
But their problem, the type A problem being, they don't know when to rest. So they can never appreciate the things that they've done because it's never enough. Whereas type B people, on the other hand, they're type B person, lazy, doesn't really work, kind of sits around, rests all the time, he's happy in himself. But his problem being, he doesn't know how to be disciplined, doesn't know how to work hard. Now the problem that comes about with this is that as much as both these people, their problems are on the same stance of the podium, it's so much more noble to say, "Oh, I wish I could be more disciplined. I wish I could work hard more." Versus, "I wish I could rest more. I wish I could go lay on the beach and just tan." Like, the person who's really outwardly successful doesn't get the praise or the sympathy from other people for not being able to rest, because it's just like, you have all of this, why are you complaining?
Like, boo-hoo, you've got what you need, right?
Exactly. And then you have the person who's going like, "Oh, I wish I could be more disciplined, I wish I could." It's so much more noble to say that than the other, even though both problems are kind of on the same stance. It's an interesting dynamic that they...
Yeah, no, I get what you mean in it. And I guess with type A and type B being almost like polar opposites, they naturally would then attract in that manner as well, right?
What do you mean?
Like opposites attract.
Yes.
So in thinking about that, type A and type B are probably more likely to then form friendships or romantic relationships or anything like that potentially.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. With one thing I mentioned a few times. So when I did my episode with Joey, and then I did my episode with David, what I realized is that they're both best friends, but their mindsets kind of contrast each other.
Yeah.
So they both ground each other in a way, which is very, very cool to see between two people. So you have, for example, Joey, who's all about self-love. You should appreciate yourself and the stuff that you do, and you should be grateful, all that. But Dave is more like I want to use all my time in the day. I want to be as productive as I can. There's no point of sitting around and not using my time for something useful.
Yeah.
And it's I need to work hard, I don't think I'm doing enough, versus you've done enough. Be grateful for what you've done. And it's so interesting to see the contrast between friendships.
And what do you think you are?
Type A. Oh, wow. Good question. I think a lot of times I'm a bit more type B than I would like to be. But I can be type A when I get really excited about something towards what to work towards, I'm fucking type A all the time. Like I'm working, and I'm never done enough. And as long as I'm getting a good amount of positive reinforcement from it, like even like an extra subscriber in a day, I'm like, fuck yeah, I can keep going at this. Like it's so yeah. But when I don't have that, which is what's been happening with the show at least, it's like it's a podcast, it's hard to grow. I haven't really had that positive reinforcement, so I've been more type B than I would like to be recently.
And is that with this podcast specifically?
Yeah, it's only with this specifically. There's I mean, it's probably with a lot of other things as well. Like even with my course in architecture. But it's a bit different because with art, it's like, yeah, you start sketching and then at the end result, you have the positive reinforcement, like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
It's the same with editing. Like it's with any skill actually, which is interesting. The better you get at something and the more skilled you become at it,
Yeah.
the more positive reinforcement you give yourself towards something. So the person who's new at editing versus the person who's really a professional at it, person who's new won't be able to notice like, oh, when I do this is probably what's going to happen, get more positive reinforcement and have that feedback loop. Versus someone who's professional, it's like, oh, if I put this on here and this on here, it's going to look like this. And then you get that feedback loop. So I went on a bit of a tangent, but it's like, it's the level you are at a certain skill. And yeah, I think with certain things I can be more type A than type B, especially if I'm really good at it. Whereas, yeah, recently I've been more type B because I need some little bit of positive reinforcement. And I guess that's something I'm trying to work on. Like, I don't need to have that.
And how do you think you might be able to manifest that positive reinforcement? Because you always have to earn it, right? And in certain times you might be naturally on the right path with something, so the positive reinforcement does come, and you've almost managed to naturally manifest your way into that momentum. But if, for example, you're not getting that positive reinforcement, you're trying to grow something and you're not quite getting the results that you wish, at what point do you need to dig deeper and understand why that is, and how you might actually then be able to manifest that positive reinforcement? Because there are people who start their shows on YouTube or Spotify or anything, and immediately it starts growing, right? And for some people it doesn't, but then slowly they figure things out and then it begins growing, right? Well, there's definitely something, especially with something so digital, there's an algorithm behind it at the end of the day. You're dealing with you doing something, it going through an algorithm that sends it out to people or doesn't send it out to people in certain ways, people viewing it, and upon viewing it, they're undergoing some form of internal process or internal monologue that lets them decide whether they want to continue watching, to stop watching and move on, to subscribe, to follow. At what point do you need to dig deeper into that side of things to understand why you're not getting a positive reinforcement, to then figure out how you can manifest that positive reinforcement?
It's a good question. It's a very good question.
And I think that might be a more type A way of thinking about it, to still get yourself into the type B-ness that you want to attract, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. It's a good question. I feel like I have an answer for you. It's good. When do I check? Okay. I think the most important thing when you're doing, making a show, starting a YouTube channel, whatever, making a business, it's just some constant iteration. And one thing that I'm very aware of myself, like in the things I need to do and the things I'm not doing, it's just about like actually doing the right things.
Yeah.
So for example, once I like something, I'm gonna try make my thing like that thing that I liked previously, and which is wrong. Like I'll say, for example, like I'll look at YouTube and I'll be like, oh, I really like the way they've done that. If I did it, I think it'd be really cool as well. But the problem is, they only like that because of constant iteration from a starting point to the ending point. Like there's that entire gap in between. I can't just hopscotch to that point because I've done that as well.
Yeah.
It's the I need to understand that I need constant iteration, and just because I like the way something is doesn't mean I can do it and expect the same results. So it's something that I'm aware of, and it's something I'm trying to work on, just being able to constantly iterate my stuff. Just gonna have to see where that goes. Like the one thing I've noticed recently is that, like, yeah, the show's cool, like the recording's cool, but I need to, what can I do to make more people watch? Focus on the substance. If the substance is good, eventually people are gonna like it. That's my look on it. If I'm making good stuff and I like it, and I really think it's cool, there's going to be a consortium of people out there who are like, yeah, this stuff is cool. He knows what he's talking about. So that's my kind of take.
And that's where the iteration's key as well, isn't it? Where you're not, even if you do something right, you're not going to immediately get the reinforcement that it is right. And that's, to be honest, something that I had as a very, as a very harsh reality at one point, where, you know, I was constantly sitting, iterating, improving, and I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And it just came to me at one point. I was like, you know what, like that's kind of just the reality of the world as well. That you can make something that the substance is actually fantastic,
and it is a great video, or if you're offering a service, it's a great service, or if you're working in corporate, you're a very good worker. But sometimes you're not going to get the credit you feel you deserve with it. And if you simply give it the volume, basically, of just making more of it, eventually it will get seen. Even though it's not getting seen now, even if you put your heart and soul into a video and it ends up getting 10 views, and you're like, okay, well, what was all the 10, 12 hours of editing this video for? But then the more you do that, and the more you ultimately give yourself momentum, even if it's getting 10 views, that's 10 whole people, right? And if the substance was good, well, those 10 people will want to come back for more, right? Even though it's barely anyone, right? They'll still want to come back for more.
Yeah.
And maybe within 2 weeks, that's going to turn into 15, 20 people. And it's also the power of kind of compounding, right? Is that eventually that'll then begin spiraling and snowballing into something positive. And that's something that I found only really started happening like a couple years ago, right, in my life, where I'd been working really, really hard, and especially in the powerlifting stuff. And I started coaching even in powerlifting like 2018. Initially I wasn't getting any clients, even though I was offering it for free. I got like 2-3 clients, but that was two entire people, right? Who I can program, who I can manage their technique, take them into competitions, give them results, right? And you can think the same thing about the people that are watching your videos. That's 10, I don't know what the views are, but like 10, 100, whatever, entire people who were sat there on their phone, on their TV, on their computer, and they're consuming what you're creating. And so long as the substance is there, then they're going to want to come back for more. But they also want to rely on you. And this is one thing with content as well that I've learned, is that for you to be able to consistently grow, people end up relying on you to create content. Like, I haven't posted anything over the last week or two, right, on my Instagram. And I've had a couple of messages like, yo, like, bro, I've not seen any posts from you, like, what's up? And I'm like, oh, damn, like, I didn't know it was deep like that, right? Like, I just got busy. I needed to sort some stuff out with my work. But imagine that, like, my page isn't even that big. But imagine, let's say you're Joey level, where you're 200-something K followers. Well, why do you think he's gaining that many followers? Why do you think so many people, why do you think he has a fan base, ultimately? Is because he shows up regularly and people can rely on him. And initially, that's not going to be the case, right? People aren't going to immediately rely on you, or you're not going to get any fans immediately or any of this crazy momentum. But the more you work on it, and the more you iterate, even when you're not getting the results, it's that when you do get the results, you then gain the benefit. Bit of a tangent there, but
Yeah, okay.
There's a couple of things to go into that. Well, set. Should we hear set? Yeah.
Barbell Coalition. Yeah, let's talk about that. So where did that idea originally come from? So this is while I was living in Mead.
So I've got a very good friend that I met at uni called Mahin. Sorry, at where? At uni. Called Mahin. And I met him in the powerlifting club, right? Very strong guy. And when I moved to Leeds after uni, he lives near Leeds anyway. He's in not Bradford. Mahin does not live in Bradford.
Yes. But yeah, he lives in Leeds basically. And so we hung out a lot more. And just while we were chilling, there was just this idea floated about. And he's the ideas guy, by the way. And you'll know this from talking to him. Like he has great ideas, great vision. And he was there like, yo, bro, like, we should start a coaching company, man. Right? And I was like, you know what, man, that's a great idea. What would we call it? And we went through a lot of very bad names that no one will ever hear because they were horrific. Some very bad logos. And then, yeah, basically we went with Barbell Coalition. And that's kind of where the vision kind of started. And it was just more of an idea of let's do something fun, create a project where we kind of collaborate together, basically. And I really think when you have any type of business, even if you're solo, it's always better to collaborate in some form, right? But yeah, that's basically where the idea came about. We were just chilling a lot in my flat. And then, yeah, he just came up with the idea. And then in my Taipei-ness, I was like, yeah, great idea, let's start, basically. And then we got started from there.
Wow. Okay. What was one of the biggest problems you came across when starting Barbell Coalition?
Some of the biggest problems we came across. We got caught in a lot of the fluff of starting a business and not actually just making it happen. We incorporated it in July 22, but we didn't launch until December, right? And that's quite a long time, right? You must be thinking, what were you guys doing all that time? You want to hit a set? So I am doing it. And part of it was obviously creating the logo. We needed some time to get our logo contracted out and stuff like that. But we spent so much useless time just like riff-raffing about useless stuff that kind of makes sense. Like, oh no, the logo's too blocky. What are we going to do with our website this? And just getting caught up in very minor details and having really long meetings for no good reason. And that just comes from experience, right? Like, now that we've experienced it and know how to start a business, we can very much like have an idea now, have it launched by next week type of thing. But that'd be the biggest thing is, due to lack of experience, we didn't really know what was important and what wasn't. And we tried to launch the perfect thing rather than launching and then iterating and improving based on market feedback.
Yeah, it's the entire thing about working on. I mean, everyone says you should work hard. Always takes over working smart. But it's like you have to work hard on the right thing. You can't just work hard, expect to get somewhere if you're just working on the most useless things.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Very good. All right, you can do your set. Let's actually get some training. It's Who's your inspiration?
Who's my inspiration?
Who you look up to, role model? You know?
I look up to a lot of people in different ways, to be honest. Do you mean like who I look up to in like the broadest sense possible, or in anything specific, or
A broader sense.
in the broadest sense? Is Prophet Muhammad, to be honest. Is obviously he's our like final Islamic prophet, and he's, you know, from our perspective, the role model of how a human should be. And he's like he's basically the example, you know. So I'd say him. If it's someone who is currently alive, then there's no one that I look up to in the broadest sense, I'm going to be honest. But in different senses, I look up to different people.
So I've got a question on that, and I think this would be very, very interesting. So you look up to Prophet Muhammad. Now, the problem that you find, right? So when you set an ideal, you will constantly compare yourself to the ideal, and inevitably you'll find where you're lacking. Yeah. So like, here's the ideal, here's you, I'm missing this, right? Yeah. And a lot of people can get really discouraged by that. They're like, oh, look at what I'm missing instead of what I have.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that by looking up to someone who's supposedly this perfect human being? How can you deal with what you're missing between?
I get what you mean. I think this then comes down to some of your core beliefs. I know that I'll never be like him. I'll never be perfect, and I'll never be anywhere near it. Reason for that being that humans are imperfect, like just as a way of our human nature. We make mistakes. Sorry, music's very loud. Yeah, can speak a bit louder. As humans, we are imperfect, and that's just a fact. I know that I'll never be perfect, and I won't be him ever. But I look up to him as a role model, not as a comparative measure of, if I'm not like him, then nothing will ever be enough. But more in the sense of aiming for the stars, and even if I miss, I landed in the moon, or whatever. Aim for the moon, even if you miss, you land amongst the stars. If that makes sense. Sorry, the music's like probably up.
Yeah, that's all good. That's all good. The other thing. So I read about this concept of horizontal and vertical relationships. Do you know this? Okay, awesome. So this is a vertical relationship is kind of what we want to aim for. Horizontal is what we want to aim for, where we're on the same line with each other, where it's like we view each other as equals, and that what we do is like our worth is the same as someone else's, basically. No one is worth more than us. Vertical relationships exist most of the time in like parent and child, which makes sense, where it's like a parent knows more, the child's this like a higher up or separate. Exactly. Vertical relationship exists, and they tend to happen when it's like, say for example, the extreme the book takes in where I got it from was like, say a friend helps you clean your kitchen. If they clean the kitchen well and you say good job, you're basically implying that you know what a good job is, so you're able to tell them whether they did a good job or a bad job. So you set yourself on a higher stance than they are, assuming that they don't know what a good job is. Instead, what he says what you should do is be grateful for the person and express gratitude. No praise, no rebuking, express gratitude. So they help you clear it, you say thank you. You don't say good job because it makes you seem like you know more.
Yeah.
Right? So how, again, how do you deal with it in terms of like religion, where it's like Prophet Muhammad sets an example, right? And you kind of look at it as like, as you said, you don't look at it as a character figure, but it's like he does these things, and you feel, I guess you feel the need that you should do things similar to that and to live your life. But I'm sure that in your religion you view everyone as equal. So how does that stand? Where it's like you kind of have that vertical relation. We are supposed to keep a horizontal.
I get what you mean. I think it applies slightly differently in certain situations where, in this example, you know, if I'm using the Prophet Muhammad as an example, then, well, he is a better example of a human than I am. And it is a good thing, in my opinion, that he is on that different level. And he's on a different level, not just to me, but to everyone, if that makes sense. Okay, now, that doesn't then apply between me and my fellow human, right? If I'm talking to someone else, I'm talking to them as my equal. But it's better to have him as a pedestal because of the fact that he is the right example. Does that make sense? But that doesn't change how my relationships are with other people. Like, I'm not gonna judge you based on what I think I should be relative to the Prophet, if that makes sense. You're your own human, right? Yeah. And it's not on me to judge you or to enforce you against any of my ideals, because that would be unfair. And that would then be inherently placing you in that vertical position that you're describing, which I shouldn't be doing. Yeah. Does that make sense? So it's more of a, when it comes to that, let's say, judgment, I'd rather place that on myself first and foremost and compare how I am in comparison to the Prophet Muhammad. Now, he also isn't someone who goes around judging people, right? So actually, by placing myself in under his example, then actually I wouldn't do that in the first place, right? And I don't really think it's any of our roles to judge each other in that manner either, because again, part of our belief is that God is the one who judges us, but not just that, but he judges us at the end of time. Once time has elapsed and everyone has taken their action throughout their lifetime, right? Because you also then run the risk, firstly, of misjudging someone. We're humans, we're imperfect. So rather than seeing as, oh, we're imperfect, so let me judge other people's imperfections, well, the imperfections apply to me. So if I'm going around judging someone, maybe I'm being imperfect in my judgment and misjudging them as well, which would be unfair. Even if it's something that I'm seeing that so clearly looks one-dimensional, that, okay, this person is clearly doing this, might not be the case. You know what I mean? And there was even a saying where, I can't remember, don't quote me on this, but it's, I think, a hadith or something like that, which is like a saying of the Prophet where he said that if he sees his fellow Muslim, he wants to always assume the best in them. And that even means if he sees that there's alcohol in his fellow Muslim's beard, then he's going to assume that it was thrown on him and that he needs to clean it up. Even if the ball's in his hand, right? Assume the best. And I think that goes down to the imperfection of us as well, is that even if I see something that hindsight, like, okay, look, I'm clearly seeing a fellow Muslim brother drinking, that might not be the case. And even if it is the case, what benefit does it provide for me as a mere human to be judging him? You know what I mean? When actually, firstly, what I'm seeing might not be the case. And secondly, even if it is, maybe he knows that somewhere that he shouldn't be doing that. And maybe within the next month, 5 months, year, 5 years, he repents to God for his actions and finds his way back to God and lives a life that is in accordance with his principles, right? And so what does that mean? One, because life has elapsed and time has elapsed, that actually he's getting judged based on his final actions and who he ended up being, you know? And that includes the forgiveness that God might have placed on him for anything bad that he's done. In the same way that we seek God for forgiveness for any bad that we've done, or even if you don't have God in your life, but if you do something bad that you feel about it, you might genuinely have regret in your heart about it, you know? And so you're going to do something about that. You're not going to do something bad, make a sin or whatever it is, and then just move on with your life like nothing happened. And so, yeah, to kind of circle back to the point, the verticality, I don't know if that's the word, the verticalness of that relationship applies purely between me, the individual, and who I look up to. But then I'm not going to compare other people against that, if that makes sense. Because the right way of treating others is to treat them fairly and with empathy, and not to judge them in the same way that I wouldn't want others to judge me, since I only want God to be judging me, you know? So it kind of goes back in a circle.
How can I judge a mere human when me myself are imperfect?
Exactly. It literally goes down to that. And I think it's really important to have that humility, man, because the more you achieve in your life and the more you feel like you grow, you don't know at what point you're in the trough of the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? You don't know at what point in your life you've learned something and you feel like you know it all at this point, when actually you barely know anything. And it would be unfair to then use that as a means of arrogantly judging others or thinking you're better than others based on something that you're actually not. And even if you are, and you are at a point where you know so much, well, why not use that to help others should they want that help? And if not, let others kind of live their life. You know what I mean? But it's not like we're always going to be imperfect. To the moment we die, we're going to be imperfect. So I'd rather see the self-improvement journey as a never-ending journey that I'm holding myself accountable to. And should I be making positive change within myself and becoming such a good person in certain ways, well, other people who also want that are attracted to that, right? In the same way that when we're having this conversation, we're both into self-improvements. So throughout the conversation we're having, I'm going to be learning things from you and you're going to be learning things from me. But at no point did you enforce your ideals on me or me on you. And yet we're still both able to benefit from each other's ideals. And I feel like that's how it works, where we're able to then create synergistic and higher frequency relationships with people, where whatever someone wants to learn and wants to improve from you, that's gonna be clear and they'll be able to get that from you, but you can't force that onto them, you know? And that also then goes to the element of judging anyone. You can't judge anyone when you look really deeply and kind of look at yourself in the mirror, which I firmly believe every person should do regularly. Looking yourself in the mirror and be like, who actually am I? Not who I do I want to be, and not who do I see myself as, in an idealistic circumstance. Who actually am I? From my positives to my negatives to my flaws to my sins. Like, look at the bad in yourself before you look at the bad in others, and you'll actually find a lot. Now, at the same time, to kind of go into what you mentioned before, how does it not then become this whole situation where you're putting yourself down, you feel like nothing's ever enough? And that comes down to, do you know the concept of nihilism? Yeah, about how nothing really ever matters in the first place and is whatever, right? That same concept and that same exact perspective, some people see positively and negatively. And because if I say to you, man, like, Vanish, nothing matters, man. Like, nothing matters in the first place, so why does it matter, right? Sounds negative. What if I say to you, like, yo, bro, nothing actually matters, man. Like, okay, so, same exact thing, but seen from a different perspective. I see self-improvement as exactly the same thing. Self-improvement is not about being perfect, and you will not be perfect. And that's cool. Like, it's okay. And I see that as a comfort. Like, cool, I'll never be perfect. Like, it's okay, man. Like, I can have some forgiveness on myself when I do someone wrong, so long as I'm able to notice that, though. If I notice that I've done something bad, rather than hiding behind the veil of, I want to be perfect and I don't do bad, that becomes destructive. But if I know that sometimes I will do bad, sometimes, whether that's to myself or that's to other people, and so long as I'm able to be real with myself about that, and be able to look at myself in the mirror and know when I've done that, then it allows for a lot of positive change, where if I'm doing something negative to myself, well, I'm being real with myself and actually improve myself so that I don't do that. If I do something wrong to someone else, then I can say to them, I can look them in the eye and say, yo, like, I'm sorry, man. I shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. Whereas if I've got this more egotistical form of self-improvement, then I won't want to know what bad I'm doing, because I'm trying to be perfect. So it's almost like it just depends on the narrative you tell yourself, right? Because reality is as you see it. So whatever you tell yourself the reality is, that's the reality that you're going to live, you know what I mean? So that's my thoughts on the situation. That was a bit of a tangent, went everywhere, but yeah,
I totally agree. And there's obviously going to be left and rights to everything, but I think that's you have a great mindset of the way that you should live life. And
Yeah. Ibby,
thank you.
thank you for being on the show, man. Yeah. So that's some really, really awesome receipts. I appreciate you being on. Where can people go if they want to see what you're doing?
They can see me on Instagram at Ibby the Dridi, which I guess will be on the screen.
Yeah, it'll be in the descriptions.
Yeah, but or on my YouTube, which I want to get onto a little bit more, which is just Ibrahim Dridi. So yeah.